Hey guys, this week we're going to be talking about photosynthesis and respiration. We're going to take these two separate units and we're going to combine them together, although they're going to be 2 pages in your notebook, so just be aware of that. So what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the most important chemical reaction that happens on the planet Earth, at least if you're a living thing. The reason why we have oxygen in our atmosphere, at least in the levels that we do now, is because of photosynthesizers. So photosynthesis is a chemical reaction that takes light energy and turns it into chemical energy. Plants and other photosynthesizers take that energy and they store it as sugars. Photosynthesis happens in plants, some species of algae, even in some protists, interestingly enough. But at the end of the day, photosynthesis requires energy, carbon dioxide, and water. Photosynthesis happens inside of an organelle called chloroplasts, and it uses a chemical called chlorophyll, which is this green pigment that you associate with plants. So this is the chemical formula for the photosynthesis reaction. We start out with 6 carbon dioxide molecules and 6 water molecules, and you add some light and chloroplasts convert that into glucose and oxygen. The formula looks scary, but once you memorize it, it's pretty easy to remember. If you keep this in your brain, you'll be fine. Photosynthesis happens inside of the chloroplast, and inside of chloroplasts are things called thylakoids. These are stacked, disc-shaped sort of sacs that convert light energy into chemical energy. This is where the process of photosynthesis occurs. The part of the chloroplast that's outside of the thylakoids is called the stroma, and this is this fluid-like substance that surrounds this cell part and allows photosynthesis to happen a little more efficiently. There are 2 types of photosynthesis. There's the light-dependent reaction, which happens during the daytime when light is around, and this happens inside of the thylakoids. This is what you think of when you think of photosynthesis. The second one is called the light-independent reaction, and we won't go into a huge amount of detail here, but we should just know that this happens inside of the stroma, that fluid-like substance we were just talking about. What are the products? So what is made by photosynthesis? Well, there's glucose or food, oxygen, and in the case of the light-independent reaction, it's ATP. What is ATP? You're going to hear about this a lot, especially in this class and maybe in college. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and it is the chemical currency for energy inside of the cell. We don't have to worry about the chemical reactions right now, but just understand that ATP is the fuel of cells, and photosynthesis, at least part of it, makes this chemical. Why does photosynthesis matter to us? I think that this is kind of obvious, right? The food that you eat ultimately gets its energy from the sun. And the organisms that are taking that sun energy and turning it into edible energy are plants, photosynthesizers, producers. Okay, let's talk about another thing in this big cycle of life that we do, and this is called respiration. On a cellular level, you are respirating. When you think of respiration, maybe you think of breathing, right? Well, respiration is something that happens on the cellular level. Essentially what respiration is taking food that's already been made and breaking it down into other substances that we can use in the presence of oxygen. So you take glucose, you turn it into energy. This happens inside of all living things, including plants. Plants respirate as well. The reason being is that plants have mitochondria. Any cell with a mitochondria undergoes cellular respiration. Here's the chemical formula for respiration. Again, you don't have to freak out about this long string of numbers and letters. What we're looking at here is glucose and oxygen being turned into carbon dioxide and water. It's making 6 carbon dioxides and 6 waters, but that's it. That's all that's happening here. We're doing essentially the opposite of what photosynthesis is. If you look at these 2 formulas, what happens is we're taking the reactants and the products and we're flipping them around. There is a type of respiration that can occur where there's no oxygen, and this is called anaerobic processes. And anaerobic processes happen in very rare cases. Yeast, for instance, can do this. It includes a process called glycolysis, which is where you take sugar that already exists and you break it down. That process is called fermentation. So glycolysis is something that happens inside of the cytoplasm, and it takes these sugars and breaks them down into usable chemicals like ATP. Photosynthesis and respiration are linked together in a way that's hard to wrap your head around, right? The oxygen that you breathe comes from producers. So does the food that you eat. But in turn, you produce CO2 for those plants to use for their photosynthetic processes. Plants could exist without us, but we wouldn't be able to exist without them. This series of processes are all part of the carbon cycle that we learned about earlier in the year, where autotrophs and heterotrophs will exchange chemicals, and oxygen and carbon dioxide, or carbon specifically, will cycle through these different systems, whether they're living or not, right? So the end result is that we have a system of energy renewal. The sun is providing us energy, but this energy gets cycled around. It gets used for different processes, it gets transformed into chemical energy, but we have a cycle, a circle of life that's happening here on Earth constantly. This is one thing that keeps this closed system, the Earth, going. Without this process, without these two interlinked processes, life on Earth would not look the same or even exist at all, as far as we know. That's all for this lesson. Make sure you learn those formulas. Keep them in your brain because they're critical for the future. And that's all. Don't forget to push the buttons, like, comment, and subscribe.